Right. Part the negativity of rust.
My last message is to Mike Brewer. Mike, I'm going to keep you on your toes. I can't wait to see the first wreck that you roll into the workshop and say, do your...
In early 2017, the automotive TV world was rocked by news that Ed China, the meticulous, soft-spoken mechanic who had been the heart of Wheeler Dealers for 13 years, was leaving the show. For more than a decade, viewers had watched him methodically restore everything from rusty Minis to rare Lamborghinis, pairing his engineering expertise with a calm, almost professorial demeanor. His departure left fans stunned, confused, and in many cases furious. Ed wasn't just a host. He was an institution. Into that storm stepped Ant Anstead, a British car builder and former police officer known for his work on For the Love of Cars. He was younger, more media-polished, and brought a confident, upbeat energy that contrasted sharply with Ed's reserved style. Discovery Channel announced his arrival with optimism, billing him as the man who could carry the torch into a new era. But Ant knew what he was walking into. Replacing a beloved figure meant inheriting not just a role, but a tidal wave of fan scrutiny. The reaction was immediate. Social media lit up with heated debates. Some viewers were open-minded, curious to see what Ant could bring to the workshop. Others were hostile from the start, calling for Ed's return before Ant even filmed his first episode. For a man who prided himself on craftsmanship and credibility, this wasn't just a job, it was a test of resilience. When cameras began rolling for his debut season, Ant faced a balancing act. He had to respect the format fans knew and loved while subtly reshaping it with his own methods, modern tools, fresh fabrication techniques, and a willingness to try new approaches. The builds flowed. The banter with Mike Brewer felt natural, and slowly some critics began to soften. But behind Ant's easy smile was an unspoken truth. The shadow of Ed China loomed large, and every wrench he turned was under the microscope. When Ant Anstead's first Wheeler Dealers episodes aired in late 2017, the reception was surprisingly warm, at least compared to the firestorm that preceded them. Viewers who had braced for the worst began to admit that Ant's charm and skill were winning them over. His background as a craftsman was clear. He wasn't just bolting on parts for TV. He fabricated panels from scratch, rebuilt engines with precision, and even introduced techniques that hadn't been showcased before on the show. Mike Brewer, the long-running co-host and dealmaker, seemed genuinely energized by Ant's arrival. On camera, their dynamic was lively. Mike's Wheeler Dealer personality balanced by Ant's skull-headed approach in the workshop. The pair traveled the UK and the US hunting for project cars from classic MGs to rugged Land Rovers. And Ant's easy way of explaining mechanical processes became a selling point for the new era. Social media began to shift. Comments praising Ant's teaching style and enthusiasm trickled in. He's different from Ed, but in a good way. One fan wrote, Discovery saw the momentum and leaned into it, featuring Ant more prominently in promotional material and allowing him to bring in some of his own style to the builds. But beneath the surface, the seeds of future tension were quietly being planted. The long shoot days, the high production demands, and the subtle but constant pressure to meet TV deadlines all began to weigh on Ant. While the honeymoon phase brought smiles and positive headlines, it also masked the fact that the job was far more grueling than most viewers realized. It didn't take long for Ant to realize that he and Mike Brewer approached the show's bills with fundamentally different philosophies. Mike had always been the dealmaker, focused on buying cars at the right price, making smart flips, and delivering them on time to maximize profit. Ant, on the other hand, was driven by craftsmanship. He believed in doing jobs the right way, even if it meant taking extra days or weeks to finish. That difference wasn't just academic onset. It meant clashes over how much time could be spent on each stage of a build. Ant wanted to strip a car down to the bare shell and address every hidden issue. Mike and the production team often pushed for quicker fixes, focusing on the visible elements that would look good on camera. The disagreement wasn't personal, at least at first, but it was persistent. Ant began to feel boxed in. Viewers at home saw the finished product, but they didn't see the debates in pre-production meetings or the compromises made to meet deadlines. To Ant, the compromises chipped away at the authenticity of the show. To Mike, they were simply the reality of TV. The tension was subtle, but growing. Crew members noticed Ant getting quieter after certain planning sessions. His upbeat mood replaced quiet frustration. He had joined the show to build cars his way, but slowly the show was building him into something else. If the creative tensions were frustrating, the physical and mental toll of the wheeler-dealer schedule was exhausting. Each season required multiple complete restorations, often filmed back-to-back with tight deadlines that left little room for rest. On top of that, Ant was expected to be on for the cameras at all times, explaining every step for the audience while still delivering professional-grade work. Days often began before sunrise and stretched late into the night. Weekends weren't guaranteed. Even when Ant wasn't filming, he was sourcing parts, liaising with suppliers, or preparing for the next episode. It was in effect two full-time jobs, master mechanic and television presenter, compressed into the same relentless calendar. For Ant, who took pride in quality, the pace felt unsustainable. Mistakes became harder to avoid, not from lack of skill, but from sheer fatigue. The physical strain, hours spent over an engine bay lifting heavy components, was compounded by mental exhaustion from being under constant scrutiny. Still, Ant pushed through, determined to prove himself. He knew some fans were still waiting for him to fail, and the thought of quitting never entered his mind. But as the seasons wore on, the cost of that determination would start to show in his demeanor, his patience, and eventually his decision to walk away. Even after years on wheeler-dealers, Ant Anstead couldn't escape the shadow of the man he replaced. Ed China wasn't just a former co-host. He was a legend to the show's longtime fans, the tall, soft-spoken engineer who had been there from the start. When Ed left in 2017, his departure video, where he hinted at creative disagreements, went viral, and some fans never forgave Mike Brewer or the network for the change. From the moment Ant took over, every episode brought comparisons. YouTube comments, Twitter threads, and Facebook fan groups debated endlessly. Ed would have done it better. Some fans went beyond criticism, sending messages to Ant, questioning his legitimacy on the show or accusing him of being the network's choice instead of the people's choice. Ant tried to take it in stride. In interviews, he praised Ed's legacy and even credited him for paving the way for presenters like himself. But in private, the constant comparisons weighed heavily. Every build felt like a test, not just to please Mike and the producers, but to satisfy an audience that seemed split down the middle. For Ant, the pressure wasn't just about living up to Ed. It was about doing so while forging his own identity. Yet no matter how much skill he brought to the table, the shadow remained, and as Ant later admitted to friends, it felt like trying to win a race while starting 10 laps behind. By the time Ant had settled into his role, the expectations on him had become a perfect storm. A known side was Mike. A grueling stretch of back-to-back builds had left the entire crew burned out. One project, a car Ant had been excited to restore, was rushed to meet a sponsored deadline, skipping key steps in the process. To Ant, it was a compromise too far. Then came the late-night shoot that turned into a confrontation. Sources close to the production recall a heated discussion between Ant, Mike, and members of the crew about cutting scenes and skipping repairs for the sake of time. Ant pushed back, insisting the fix was necessary to make the car safe. Mike, focused on wrapping the episode, argued they could address it off camera. The disagreement didn't end in shouting, but it left a mark. Ant walked away from that shoot knowing the gap between his vision and the show's reality was too wide to bridge. The passion that had brought him to wheeler-dealers was being swallowed by deadlines, compromises, and an environment where craftsmanship was no longer the top priority. Not long after, Ant made his decision. There was no dramatic blow-up, no public resignation video, just a quiet choice to step away. He knew the fans would have questions, and he knew many would never hear the full story. But for Ant, the cost of staying had finally outweighed the rewards. When Ant Anstead finally stepped away from wheeler-dealers in 2020, there was no official farewell episode, no emotional montage, and no grand send-off for the viewers. Instead, it happened almost silently. Fans tuning in for the next season simply saw a new face, Mark Elvis Priestley, standing beside Mike Brewer, with Ant's absence explained only in passing. For many viewers, the lack of closure was jarring. Social media lit up with speculation. Was there a fight? Did the network force him out? Had the tension between Ant and Mike finally boiled over? The truth, according to those close to him, was far less explosive. but far more personal. Ant didn't want a dramatic public goodbye. He wanted to walk away quietly without adding fuel to the rumor mill. Behind the scenes, the decision had been months in the making. Ant had discussed his growing dissatisfaction with friends, citing the relentless filming schedule, the compromises in build quality, and the toll it was taking on his personal life. The pandemic only amplified those pressures, making Traveland production even more complicated. By leaving without fanfare, Ant avoided turning his departure into a media circus. But in doing so, he left fans without answers, forcing them to piece together the story from scattered interviews, subtle hints, and industry whispers. And for someone who had poured so much into the show, the silence spoke volumes. After leaving Wheeler Dealers, Ant Anstead didn't slow down. He reinvented himself. Instead of chasing another network gig, he shifted focus to passion projects that allowed him full creative control. One of the biggest was Radford Returns, a revival of the legendary British coach builder, which he co-founded alongside former Formula One driver Jenson Button. The project let him blend history, engineering, and design in a way television schedules never allowed. He also began taking on high-profile one-off builds for celebrity clients, restored rare classics in his own shop, and expanded his role as an automotive educator, sharing tips, techniques, and deep dives on Instagram and YouTube. Away from the structured chaos of a TV set, and had the freedom to slow down, to spend weeks perfecting a detail most viewers might never notice. On a personal level, his life shifted as well. His public relationship with actress Renee Zellweger drew tabloid attention. But for Ant, it wasn't about the headlines. It was about stability. He seemed happier, more relaxed, and far more in control of his work-life balance. By removing himself from the pressure cooker of Wheeler Dealers, Ant had carved out a lane where craftsmanship, not deadlines, defined success. And for the first time in years, he wasn't building cars for camera. He was building them for himself. Today, Ant speaks about his time on Wheeler Dealers with a mix of pride and caution. He doesn't badmouth Mike Brewer, nor does he take shots at the network. Instead, he frames his departure as a necessary step toward protecting both his creative integrity and his mental health. In interviews, he has praised the fans who supported him and acknowledged the privilege of working on a show with such a massive global audience. But when asked if he would ever return, his answer is measured. He's grateful for the experience, but he's moved on. "Life's too short to compromise on what you love," he once said. For Ant, the dark final days on Wheeler Dealers weren't about drama. They were about clarity. The long nights, the creative battles, the pressure to perform, all of it led him to the realization that no amount of television fame was worth sacrificing the joy that first drew him to a garage as a young man. Now, at this stage in his career, he's not chasing screen time or ratings. He's chasing the perfect build, the next great design challenge, and a life that belongs entirely to him. And if those quiet final days taught him anything, it's that sometimes walking away is the most powerful thing you can. But the distance of thousands of miles and busy schedules meant Ant missed many important milestones in his children's journey to adulthood. Ant's relationship with Christina Hall was perhaps the briefest and most tumultuous chapter of his romantic life. They married in late 2018, had son Hudson in 2019, and divorced less than 2 years later. Tensions escalated after the divorce as the couple engaged in a custody battle over Hudson, which was decimated by public and legal pressure, but things cooled down in 2023-24. Christina shared on social media that she learned to put the good of her son above any personal feelings. In late 2024, they started a new TV project together. The Flip Off, a sign that they had at least found a way to coexist for Hudson's sake. If the first marriage was a pure commitment, the second relationship was full of public pressure, then the current relationship with Renee Zellweger has a completely different color. The two met in 2021 when Zellweger participated in the show Celebrity IOU Joyride hosted by Ant. The relationship quickly developed but was kept private for many months. They avoided making big appearances on their carpet, did not show off their affection too much on social media, and always used short but weighty descriptions when talking about each other. By 2025, Zellweger had officially moved in with Anand Hudson in San Diego. Close friends confirmed that Renee was the one who helped stabilize the family during Radford's downfall. She appeared behind the scenes on Born Mechanic episodes, helped plan Hudson's birthday, and helped manage Ant's media relations when things